I was around the age of 18 when this happened. This takes place in my hometown in rural Oregon. The town's name is Elkton. Not like that matters. You probably never heard of it. The town has a population of less than 1,000 people and consists of a restaurant, a bar, a store, a park, and a post office, all surrounded by scattered farmland. Nothing bad ever really happens there, and everyone knows each other. At this point of my life, I was lazy. I had no job, no car, still lived with my mom, and smoked a lot of weed. A certified loser. My routine was sleep in until I felt like waking up, get stoned, and play video games. Once I got bored with that, I'd walk over to my buddy's house and hang out for the rest of the night. I'd usually hang out there until around 1 a.m. For reference, I lived about 2 miles out of town, and my buddy lived in town. The walk wasn't bad though, and was probably the only exercise I was getting. I'd just pop in my headphones and zone out. This happened during one of those nights when I was walking back home. I was walking through town on the main road. I had my headphones in and was just vibing while I made the 2-mile trek. As I approached the park, I noticed a car sitting in the parking lot. It was a bit weird at first, because usually I would never see people on these walks home. The whole town was asleep during those hours. I shrugged it off as maybe someone passing through and taking a nap or something. Just off the road by the park is a trail that leads down to the river. At the start of the trail, there's a bench. As I approach the part of the road that passes by the trail, some random guy abruptly appears from the trailhead. I would say this guy looked to be in his early 40s, judging by how he dressed and his facial features. One thing was strange though. He had aviators on, at 1 a.m. He power walked in front of me and sat on the bench. The whole situation was striking me as weird. It looked like he was just staring at me the entire time, but it was really hard to tell for sure because of the dark glasses. I was a little freaked out at first and stupidly shrugged it off. I just started walking diagonally, so there would be some distance between us once I passed him. So I pass him. I look at him, and he was still looking at me, so I took my earbuds out and kindly say, "How's it going?" I think that was a bad move. He didn't reply, of course. I just picked up the pace and focused on getting home. This guy gave me major chills, so I left one earbud out so I could hear and be aware of my surroundings. I just got about a quarter mile away down the road and decided to look back to see if he was still sitting there. He wasn't. He was now walking behind me, following me pretty heavily, and he was closing the distance. I swear my heart skipped a beat when I saw this. Could he really be following me? Maybe he lives up here too. But that had to be his car at the park, so why is he on foot? All these questions were flying through my head. I looked back and he was even closer and walking at a faster pace. Fight or flight kicked in, and I went from a casual stroll to a dead sprint instantly. I looked back once more, and he matched my pace and was now sprinting as well. For some reason, I decided to veer off the road and cut through the forest. I sprinted over broken branches and through brush for a bit until I eventually dove into a big bush. I instantly went silent. I could hear him stomping through the forest behind me. Then suddenly, he went quiet as well. I think he was trying to pinpoint where I was. This lasted a few minutes before I heard him start to go the other way back to the park. I felt so relieved that he gave up. I still waited there for a few more minutes until his footsteps faded away, and I was sure he was out of the forest. Then I cut back through the road as quietly as I could. Once I hit the pavement, I checked both ways to make sure he wasn't there. There was no sign of him anywhere, but honestly, I could only see for probably 40 feet in either direction, because I was no longer in the main part of town and there were no street lamps. I was still relieved because I thought for sure I had lost him, so I just focused on getting home. I was only about a mile away or so at this point. Eventually, I put my headphones back in and started to relax as much as I could, not even fully cluing in on what just happened. A few minutes passed and I started to notice a light coming up behind me. Headlights from a vehicle. My stomach sank as I was praying that it wasn't him. He must have gone back to get his car, I thought. As it approached me, it slowed down. I cringed as it pulled up next to me and came to a stop. I looked expecting to see that guy wielding a weapon and demanding that I get in the car. Thankfully, it wasn't him. It was a local guy around my age, Brent, on his way home from a get-together. What's up, dude?" I spoke. "Hey man, do you need a ride home?" he asked. Stupidly, I replied, "Nah, dude, it's all good. I'm almost home. Thanks, though." I could see a worried expression on his face as he cut me off. "Are you sure? You know there's someone following you, right?" I immediately looked down the road behind me, and there he was. The same guy. He was closer than ever before, and I somehow never noticed him. I could see something in his hands reflecting from Brent's taillights. I never lost him. He was following me the entire time. I was completely oblivious. I looked back at Brent and didn't say anything and scrambled in the truck. I didn't say anything during the ride. All I was thinking about how stupid I was. We pulled into my driveway, and I was never happier to see my house. As I was getting out of the truck, Brent jokingly said, "I probably just saved you from being murdered." He couldn't have been closer to the truth, honestly. The older I get, the scarier this experience becomes. What were his intentions? What was he going to do? Kill me? Abduct me? Why was he in Elkton, Oregon, of all places? I'm glad I never found out. I stopped staying at my buddy's house so late after this experience, and always kept one earbud out so I could be aware of my surroundings. No matter how much you think you know an area, or how safe you think it is, you should always be prepared for anything. There are truly evil and insane people in this world. Stay safe out there, everyone. The events of this story took place around the autumn months of 2014. I'm not sure what would have happened if my mom hadn't heard this person, but either way, I'm grateful she did. To help paint a better picture of the events I'm about to describe to you, I must first briefly explain the basic layout of my home. There are 3 entrances to my home: the front, side, and the back door, which was in what was my bedroom at the time. The back door has a glass window that allows a perfect view of a 1/4 acre of our backyard. This might not seem like much, but living in Salem, Oregon, that's as good as you're gonna get. To access the backyard, you must first walk down the driveway on the left side of the house, leaving you visible to the next door neighbors. This is also where our brittle side door from the 1940s lie. At the end of the driveway is our garage, and to the right of that, our backyard, as unfortunately, there was no gate at the time, but this incident and several others like it led us up to putting one up, and we also put up a roughly 7-foot tall fence. Now that you know the basic layout of my home, you're probably noticing the potential for something sinister to happen. And happen it did, my friends. But one thing for certain is it could have gone a lot worse. This incident took place in the early hours of 2 or 3 a.m. As I've always been a hardcore insomniac, I'd probably be the president if there was a club. Anyways, I was watching YouTube on my tablet as most 13-year-olds do, when I'm startled by a beam of light illuminating the garage doors in my periphery. Before I even turned my head to look, I had already come to the following conclusions. 1. The familiar circle beam of light was a flashlight, and 2. I had a Henry .22 caliber survival rifle under my bed that I used for target practice just in case. Thank God my family's a gun family. I decided to wait to see who it was, and to see where this light was coming from, as it wasn't uncommon for our neighbor to come into our yard looking for his cat. It's a good thing I did too, because the flashlight was attached to the business end of a 9mm handgun held by a uniformed police officer complete with a ballistics vest, taser, baton, and radio. Confused, I leave my bedroom expecting to see my mom sitting on the couch watching her favorite TV show, Bones. Instead, I saw my mother on the tips of her toes leaning over the kitchen sink, looking out the window, and peering, trying to see a view of the officer, slowly and methodically creeping his way up the driveway and up to our garage. Yep, he's definitely here for us, I thought as I began to ask my mom what was going on. Apparently less than 15 feet away from my bed, a homeless person high on who knows what had snuck into our backyard and accidentally kicked our glass recycling bin, alerting my mom, who was in the basement doing laundry. My mom tells me she then looked out the basement window, and she saw this person making some kind of stance, one would be to try to balance on a board. It was strange, almost like the stance a child would do when they're out of bed at late hours of the night trying to be sneaky to fetch a snack. Regardless of their feeble attempts at being stealthy, my mom had seen them, and they must have caught on to it, because by the time my mom went upstairs to retrieve her phone and dial 911, and an officer finally arrived, they were all gone. The cop told us that no one was in our garage or the backyard, and I could almost feel the anxiety lift off my mother's shoulders. Even more so when the officer offered to send someone over to survey the house until sunrise. So just to clarify, and to kind of make you understand why we ended up getting security cameras and a fence in the backyard and a motion detector light, was that this guy easily got into our yard, could have easily broken into our house, and done who knows what to our family. I'm just glad it didn't come down to that. I'll start off by saying that this is not my story, but it was such a crazy encounter that I have since asked each of my friends through the years to recount the events. This happened around the year 2000. About a year after this took place, I started dating one of these friends, and that's when I first heard about this dog or a wolf. I have since asked each friend, over the years miles apart, and they all remember the same exact encounter, almost down to the exact detail. Before my ex James was even my boyfriend, he and our friends were about 17 to 18 years old. At that age, I remember it being an adventure to find a place to smoke. Let's hike to insert spot here and go puff. The group was consisted of James, his best friend Brad, and their girlfriends Shannon and Mel. The four of them decided to drive to Mount Pisgah, a beautiful wooded area outside of Eugene, Oregon. It's more of a hill, to be honest, but it's nature in its prime for sure. I've been out there many times growing up, and I know exactly what trail they were on. The main one that connects the parking lot to the river. They had driven in Brad's little white sedan, parked in the parking lot, and then walked across the river. On the way to the river from the lot, there's a small bridge that crosses a small creek. This will be relevant for later. The group spent the day out there swimming and puffing and swimming. Just being typical Oregonian teens. I can imagine that hunger is what drove them to go home after a couple of hours. As the sun began to set, either activity alone is bound to get some people hungry, let alone both. So, they walked along the well-worn main dirt path to the parking lot. This path has since been paved according to Google Maps. It does not take more than about 20 minutes or so for them to get back to the little footbridge by the parking lot that they had crossed when they hiked in. When they reached the small footbridge near the parking lot, Brad looked out into the vast field between them and the wooded mountain and noticed a huge dog near the tree line, probably 100 yards or so away. They all later described it as the biggest dog they had ever seen. The dog was just sitting there, not looking scary per se, just looking absolutely humongous. But from Mel's and James's descriptions and the drawings she did for me later in around 2005, it was very shaggy and furry looking. I may even still have that notebook where she drew the dog thing in. If I find it, I will send it into the show. My friends continued to walk across this small wooden bridge, and one of the girls screamed. The big dog was now on its hind legs, walking like a person, standing much closer than when they had last seen it, a couple of seconds earlier. It had somehow traversed most of the large field in the seconds it took for them to get across the 10-foot-long bridge. Whatever this thing was, it was quiet, fast, and stealthy. My four friends ran to the car, and they had the classic cliche, "I can't get the key in" moment, because Brad was fumbling madly for the keys out of anxiety. At this point, the dog was standing on its hind legs at the very edge of the parking lot looking at them. Still, it had this dog face and this dog-like body, but it was standing up. It just seemed so unnatural. They never saw it walking on all four or just two. It just seemed to teleport and move closer and closer. It was like every time they looked up, it was just standing there, but closer. As James had said, every time they looked up, he was closer but not moving. All of them recounted how surreal it was to see a dog standing on its hind legs with no effort. I don't know if it ran for a few ticks then stood up again at intervals in the field, but that's the way they described it. Many times I had asked them, "Are you sure it was not a bear?" And every single time they would say no. It was a dog standing on its hind legs. A big dog that was stalking them. This happened in Lane County, Oregon, sometime around the year 2000. There are few if any bears out there. It would be odd, but then again I wasn't there. The kids got into the car and sped off, leaving the Pisgah dog to his own business. I've never had a reason to doubt any of their stories. In fact, Shannon doesn't even like talking about the incident at all because it's creepy for her and gives her anxiety. I'm a 15-year-old girl living in Oregon, and on the 9th, it was my birthday and I wanted some friends to come over. So I brought my friends Ella and Jade to have a sleepover. We did the normal teen activities, but once it hit 2 a.m., we got bored and decided to sneak out and walk to Walmart. To give you information about my property, we only have 15 acres, and to get to Walmart it's about 3 miles from my house. So we put warm clothes on, grabbed our wallets, and took the screen out of my window and went to Walmart. After roughly 30 minutes of walking, we heard a car behind us, and we got to the side so it could drive past us. But no, the car stopped and a man was in it. He asked, "Hey girls, you need a ride?" "No, we're fine, thanks though," Ella said. The guy kept trying to get us into his beat-up pickup truck, but we kept saying no and eventually he drove off. "Huh, that was weird," I said, looking at my friends who were kind of scared. "I think we should just go back," Jade said, trembling, not just from the cold but also that guy looked like a serial killer in a horror movie. I thought about it, but I'm too stubborn and just went ahead. Eventually, we reached Walmart and bought a bunch of junk food and drinks. We were walking back and talking about our crushes and gossiping when we heard another car behind us. And then we saw it was the same green pickup truck, but behind it was another truck as well. All of us freaked out and dropped everything we had and ran as fast as we could. But when you're running from a truck you don't know, you're not going to win because both trucks stopped us with 5 grown men in them. They all jumped out and then circled us. The 3 of us huddled together, and I was about to ask what they want when the first guy stopped us and pulled out a gun. We started sobbing in each other's arms, and the men started closing in on us with their arms outreached and smiles on their faces. We thought we were going to die or be sold into some sort of trade, but just in time a police officer pulled up when the guys were distracted. We ran to the car. "What's going on?" the cops said, eyeing the men. They said nothing, jumped in their trucks, and drove off. We got in the car and told the officer the entire story as he drove us home. He said he wouldn't say anything to my parents because we snuck out, but he said if trouble ever happened, call the cops again and ask for Officer Addington. So we went home and slept till 12:30. My parents still don't know, and it's going to stay like that until I'm much older. I know this story may not be the scariest, but it was one of the scariest things to ever happen to me, and I wanted to share it. So this story takes place a few years ago, while I was walking home from high school. I didn't normally walk home, but I didn't have a ride home from the game club that day, so I had no choice. It's about a 45-minute walk from the school to my house, and I really wish that I wasn't doing it and did not look forward to it. Game club got out at about 6, and it was winter, and snow was still on the ground. It was also quite dark, and I hate the dark. Anyways, I just walked past the Safeway, then past the Goodwill donation center, when this homeless guy started walking behind me with his shopping cart. I felt anxious, but I've always been paranoid, so that's nothing new. He got faster and ended up walking next to me for a while, then turned his head to look at me. "Don't worry, I'm not following you," he spoke. This freaked me out a bit, but I just simply replied with a short, "Okay." I'm an awkward person, so I wasn't sure how to respond. I also thought he was my dad's friend at the time, because he looked a lot like him, but it was also dark, so I couldn't completely see him. He then said, "People usually think that I'm following them." I think I just stayed silent, and didn't respond. After a few minutes of us walking, he asked, "So where are you headed?" I told him, "Home," still thinking this is my dad's friend, and he asked, "Where's that?" Alarms went off in my head, and I was scared at this point, but also confused. Being the idiot I was, I answered his question by telling him the street, not the address, thankfully. I should have lied, though. He then went on by saying, "Oh, that's a long way from here." I don't remember if I said anything in return, but it was obvious that he was indeed following me. The next thing I remember is that we were walking by Circle K, when he then offered me $1 to buy a soda. I didn't want to take it, but ended up accepting it anyways and told him thanks. I felt bad about it, but he seemed like he wouldn't accept no as an answer. We went across the street to Circle K, but I honestly regret not running away as soon as he started crossing. Once we got to the store, he told me he would be waiting for me. He wouldn't go in because the person working there didn't like him. That terrified me. I know I should have told the worker I was being followed and got some sort of help, but I just did not think about this at the time. I ended up getting a slushie, blue raspberry, my favorite. I walked out of the store and there he was, still there like he said he would be. We continued to walk and I had no clue what to do. I had never been in a situation like this. We were getting close to a part of the road that went over a river and a bunch of trees around it. He randomly asked, "Do you want to put your bag in my cart?" I shockingly replied, "No thanks, I'm fine." He then tried to tell me that he was just trying to help and tried to convince me, saying, "Are you sure? I don't mind." I then nervously thanked him but assured him that I was fine. Even if he was trying to help, I didn't want to risk getting my stuff stolen. Plus, the vibe I was getting from him was super creepy. I don't think I had any weapons on me at the time, but I wish I did, just in case. We were now on the road that was over the river when he says, "I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back." I stood in shock for a moment as I watched him and his cart disappear, then I slowly walked forward a bit and stepped on some snow, just to hear that satisfying crunching sound. I don't know if this is odd, but I enjoy stepping on things like snow, ice, and leaves. But anyways, I asked myself if this was my chance, and if I should just leave. The answer is obvious, I know. I started to walk away when I saw a car pull up into the building closest to me, and they got out of their car and called for me. Thank goodness it was an acquaintance of mine. I ran over, and they offered me a ride home, and of course I accepted. They were just driving home from one of their clubs that just got out. Thankfully, I jumped in. The homeless guy walked past me and saw me, and yelled something about me getting in, and if I knew them or something like that. Either way, I'm so thankful Evan was there to help me out. I don't know what would have happened if he didn't pass by that night, or if he didn't see me walking. I saw the homeless guy again later, but he was at Circle K and thankfully didn't notice me walk by. I live in a new house now, but I still live in that same town of Sweet Home, Oregon. I have never had another experience with that man, and I hope I never do again. The year was 2006, sometime in mid-August. We had been renting this double-wide trailer on 6 acres of land for about 3 years now. The first year nothing strange really happened at all, unless you asked my mother. We've always been low income, so we were constantly moving, year after year, ever since I was knee-high. So we thought we hit the jackpot when it came time to finding this new and very affordable place. We've had enough of the landlord from our last place. This new place was cheap enough for just some reason. I'm from Tacoma, Washington, and this new place was just too good to be true. Lots of land, it had a barn, a detract garage, and lots of land. Oddly enough, the middle school I would be attending the following year after moving in was literally just across the road, Cougar Mountain Junior High. The school district even eventually offered this landlord millions of dollars for his land, and he cautiously declined. At first, it really wasn't so bad. Really, the last residents did a real number on the place though, however. Right off the bat, there was a large section of the wall cut out from the detached garage. A coffee can-sized hole that went straight through the floor by the fireplace. A large pile of trash out back by the burn pit. A very leaky ceiling and, most alarming, candle wax melted into the carpet of the house and garage, which we finally figured out years later why. There was also lots of trash stuffed into the chicken coops. The trash remained there long enough for officials to stop and take pictures. Then the landlord finally removed it. Even after all of that happened, I don't wish to say scumlord, because this landlord obviously did enough and had enough on his plate. He was always around and active. I don't know, I just don't want to blame him, I guess. Although, there were things he just wouldn't mention to us, or anyone to that matter, and you can obviously tell he was very cautious about something. You can see he was obviously sweating something about our property. He only lived right across the ranch out back, and a kitty corner from us. Anyway, it's been so long now, I can't quite remember when the paranormal stuff started. It was like things were gradually getting weirder and weirder up until the end. We had a rather big family. I think what was affected first by us was our behavior. Over time, it was like our family's darkest days were unfolding. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So much more happened than I'd really like to explain, and I can't cover it all without writing a book about it. We've had many dogs. I think things started really getting strange when they would bring back odd bones and things from the yard that we couldn't identify or justify. My mom emphasized that there were probably paranormal things happening because of some sort of burial ground or something. One time they dug up what looked like a monkey skull. Me being a rebellious 13-year-old put it on the fence post by the main gate to look metal for my middle schooler friends. Everyone at school pretty much knew I lived across the street. We had one dog that would always get loose and come to school, and I was the one that had to chase him around the cafeteria and bring him back home. It would literally be mentioned over the intercom, "My name here, would you please come retrieve the dog?" This happened several times. I wouldn't say I was the most popular student, or even infamously popular student or anything like that. I admit then I was strange to mess with, and I blame it on the things that went on at home. For the longest time, this was my whole life, and it still haunts me to this very day. I'm 27 now, and I literally just had a dream about that property last night about the strange things that happened there. My whole family was affected, and I'm the only one who has the guts to talk about it. Me and my mom anyway. I've never reported what I've seen. Also, over the years, I've tended to tell less and less. People just think I'm crazy, but I know now seeing is believing. That's the moral of the story here. If only people saw it for themselves. Everybody's so scared and everybody dismisses it for the sake of their own mentality. This whole property was creepy. We left all my friends when we left the trailer park. So I'd spend most of my time exploring the land here with my dogs. For no reason at all, I'd say the barn was probably the spookiest. All my family agrees even to this day, but nothing ever really happened there. I guess it was just the vibe. Out of all of this property, there was just one black Angus cow. Again, nothing ever happened. Most I did was feed the old cow apples. The barn was locked off from the cow. She'd just roamed the land, so the barn was always silent and void of activity, except massive beehives, making it even more creepy. Everyone in the household worked, so I was by myself 30% of the time. My mom says after she saw a dark, very tall figure running across the fence line outside at night, after the first year, things started to get really creepy. Maybe so from her perspective. I think things started getting weird when I couldn't sleep. For the first time in my life, I started waking up with sleep paralysis. I'd fight it and regain my freedom of movement in fear of falling back asleep. Freaked out, I'd call the one person I knew I could always count on picking up the phone, my grandma. She'd tell me to go back to sleep and even come stay with us sometimes. One night when activity was picking up, I was playing in the family room, playing my Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic game on my Xbox, when suddenly, a booming sound came from what sounded like something going over the house. I'm too engrossed with my game to really care, so I dismiss it as maybe some sort of plane flying over, even though you could only hear them from our old house. 10 minutes later, my big brother and his girlfriend came out of their bedroom whispering and visibly spooked. They asked me what that noise was. They thought it was someone with a shotgun like 10 feet away from the house. Honestly, who knows? It was loud, and really thinking about it, I guess I got scared myself, because I didn't really recognize the sound, but I couldn't really find a reason why it would be alarming. One day, I woke up and my whole family was gathered out back staring at the doggy door. This mobile home was from the 1960s and the doggy door was thick plastic. We lived here approximately a year and a half now. My oldest brother is tough as nails. We all looked down at the doggy door and it's got a checkmark shape cut on it. I remember everyone baffled as to what exactly happened. We were all so confused. My oldest brother comes out with a sharp knife and tries to cut the rest of the doggy door. He's the strongest out of the family, and he's even having trouble sawing through the plastic. I'm a painter nowadays, and I can honestly say a box cutter would have trouble going through thick 60s plastic. But there was this clean cut, almost immaculate. This is strange, but we let that go. Later, my sister's boyfriend moves in with us. He's up every morning exercising in the garage. One day, to this day, he says something was knocking in that garage. so he moved to another spot. The garage floor was 2/3 concrete, and the remainder was an elevated 2-step flooring of carpet. My sister's boyfriend was just doing push-ups when he heard a knocking from under him. First time he stops and switched places. Second time he stopped and moved to another spot. The third time, the knock was so violent, he stopped altogether. Much later, my sister and cousin were hanging out. There was this non-running car in the center of our garage the whole time we lived there. A black Mitsubishi Eclipse. It was in the very center, and on top of it was a classic red wagon that in the 2 years that I lived there, I never saw it move. A little less irrelevant, right above the wagon was an opening to the attic of the garage. Anyway, one day, out of nowhere, right in front of my sister and my cousin, the wagon on top of the car slammed to the floor and spooked them so bad that they ran out of there, like bats out of hell. Honestly, it was weird, and nobody could figure out what sent that cart flying. It was stationary that entire time, and suddenly, it just fell. If you asked me, the garage never really gave off much of a bad vibe, but, everybody has different experiences at this place. Although one night I'm hanging out with one of my older brothers and I can see the dog is chasing something. The dogs have been known to chase the cow off and on. It's dark outside, and whatever the dogs are chasing, I know it's not the cow. This thing was tall. I point out, "Hey, what's that?" My big brother is with me, and he didn't even acknowledge. It's dark, so who really knows? Maybe it's the cow, maybe there was something flying over it, and that's what I saw, I don't know. Around this time, my grades started dropping. I was sleeping more in class than at home. I was picturing things that were just very odd in my mind. I'd freak out and bolt out of class. Sometimes I'd just go straight home. Other times I'd attempt to go back to class, where I would continue sleeping during the day. For a long, solid moment there, it seemed like all of my summer of 2006, I just had these weird, vicious-looking werewolf creatures popping into my mind any time I would close my eyes. It would just be standing there at our glass door, looking back at me, panting, as if it had malicious intent. It would never actually enter the house. It would just stand there looking back at me, looking like something out of the underworld movies. Honestly, that is all I can say was on my mind. I would like to say it was just in my imagination, but it's hard to say these days. One day my brother also had the exact same dream and vision that I was having. He said that he saw this dog-man thing crouching in the hallway waiting for someone to pounce on. At this time I got the bedroom across from him, so it had been in between his bedroom and mine that we had seen something truly strange in the shadows. These dreams were seemingly becoming real. We would see these werewolves and these outlines of werewolves in our dreams, but in that hallway between our rooms, we both swear out of the corner of our eye, we would see the silhouette of something that looked like a werewolf. The landlord was honestly probably trying to hide something. I don't know. I know that there were kids that I've heard rumors from that said strange things happened on that land. I could find a little bit of history on it in public records, but nothing crazy. Honestly, I've heard of a lot of Bigfoot sightings and other things like that here as well. I've even found some things that look like Bigfoot footprints. I would love to know if anybody has any idea if this land is potentially haunted, or if all of these happenings on this land are just strange occurrences or coincidences. I'm sorry if this story was a little boring and a little jumbled, but thank you for sharing it if you do. I moved to Kent, Washington from Phoenix, Arizona in August due to a fire. I bought a car online and flew into Seattle to pick up my SUV. My boyfriend and I got into an argument, so I left my car in a parking lot in Kent, Washington and took my keys. I got hungry, so I ordered Chinese food. I wanted to go pick up my Chinese food in the plaza across from where my car was, and ended up in the wrong plaza. I walked into the wrong business and sat down at a booth waiting for my food. Like an idiot, I'm still waiting, and the lights go off and I'm still sitting there. Now what I heard is something I will never, ever hear again in my life, and I'm still losing sleep over this. I know what I saw and I know what I heard, and no one listening to me ever believes me. Not even the police officer I reported this to. I swear I could hear from the back what sounded like people being tortured. A child screaming. From below the booth and above this restaurant. This wrong restaurant that I was in. I slowly got up quietly, as there was a light on in the kitchen. I walked over to the door to see if it was still unlocked, and it was. I banged on the kitchen window and told them I'll be back tomorrow with the police, as I know what the hell is going on here. I slowly back up to the door as I know it's unlocked, and this guy is following me out to the door, and he's on his phone. By the time I get to the middle of the parking lot, I'm surrounded by all kinds of people. They're wearing what looks like hoods and dark clothing. I go as fast as I can and haul past them into a homeless camp in the woods. I know where to go and saw them pass me. There were 9 men in total chasing me. Now they know I know what's going on. At least, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm pretty sure there's some sort of human trafficking thing, and I probably found their location. I brought the cops back the next day and I was charged for trespassing and permanently banned from the property, in which I guess I don't really mind. I had to tell somebody, and the next day I did, and I did not know somebody was listening to me at the same time. A man from India overheard my conversation and asked if he could talk to me in private, in which I told him we could. He told me what I heard is exactly what I heard, and that I am to keep my mouth shut. They looked at me with a face of fear. They told me that I was in danger, so I fled to Oregon. I stopped at a truck stop to use the bathroom, and on the bathroom stall wall was an 1866 number for human trafficking, and I called it immediately crying because I was horrified of what I had heard, and I know what I heard, and so did this Indian man. I lay low right now, and I'm trying to stay low-key, and I did contact the human trafficking hotline. They told me the FBI will be in contact within a few weeks. They will be watching the place very closely. They ended up finding it, and they even have a website. This is going down in Kent, Washington, like I said. From outside, it looks like a professional business, a banquet hall, a restaurant, an Indian marketplace, and whatever else it could be. It's what people can't see underneath the place, and coincidentally, their business is down the street from the police station. Who's to say the police are not involved? I'm disgusted, and I know what's going on. I'm absolutely positive it is. Thank you for listening to my story, and sharing it if you do. I think more people need to know about this in the area. So I've sent you a few of my stories in the past, but I decided to send this one because I recently told it to one of my friends, and his reaction surprised me. He seemed genuinely unnerved, but I hadn't considered this story anything too odd. I figured I'd share this on the show, as now looking back I can't honestly figure out an explanation for what we saw. Some context is needed here. My grandparents live in Washington, in a small town near Mount Rainier. Their house is one of the relatively few up on the forested hill, and their backyard leads up to a big pasture. Beyond this is the woods, and a good chunk of it is their property. My grandfather is a hunter, and so he has this old tree stand, a wooden platform high up in between 2 trees, that my little sister and I converted into a sort of playhouse. We would spend hours out there in those woods, and I know them like the back of my hand. I've seen some odd stuff out there, but this seems by far the weirdest. This happened about 2 to 3 years ago in the summer. I can't remember a specific time for the life of me. My sister and I had been out by the tree stand, and it had been a gorgeous sunny day, not a cloud in sight. Though it was starting to get dark, the light shining through the leaves is a beautiful sight that I will never forget. These woods are truly beautiful and awe-inspiring. I love spending time in them. We would wander off a very short distance away from the stand, though it was not out of our line of sight. We had found a small fallen tree with an unnatural ditch under it. Being the kids we were, my sister and I went under the log and pretended to be soldiers hiding in a trench. It was then I noticed it. Straight ahead there was a clearing, clearly in my view. In it, someone had taken branches and set them up so they formed a circle standing upright in the clearing. This looked deliberate, as it was perfectly balanced. My sister and I thought this was so cool, so we ran into the ditch and went right up to it. Here's where things suddenly get weird. As I mentioned earlier, my grandfather is a hunter, so I know what sort of things were active in the woods and when. He would always refer to the twilight as the magic hour when the forest would come alive and all the animals would start moving. He also warned us that if the woods ever got silent, as in true complete silence, we were to go home immediately, as the silence meant a predator was near, and he has seen bears, wolves, and bobcats in the area. I bring this up because as my sister and I approached the circle, the woods fell dead silent. We could hear absolutely nothing outside of our breathing and our soft footsteps on the ground. There were no birds, no squirrels, no bugs, absolutely nothing. We inspected this scene very closely, but it didn't seem to be anything more than just a standing circle of twigs, and although it was odd, we weren't too scared. I noticed it was getting darker, and so we decided it was best to start going home. Nothing weird happened, at least not that I can think of. The sound returned as soon as we could no longer see the circle, and we made it back to our grandparents' house without incident. The next day we went back to see it, and it was completely gone, as if somebody had come and completely taken it apart. It was very weird. Looking back, the thought that someone came onto our private property just to make a circle of trees and then take it apart unnerves me. Who would do that? And what is the purpose? Was it for art, or was it intended to be scary? I honestly will never know, and I don't like that thought too much. I know this story might sound mundane, but after thinking about it for a while, it is actually incredibly unnerving. I live with my family here in Spokane, Washington. One Friday after school, my dad picks me up and my little brother up and tells me we must head over to Sprague Walmart to pick up a few odds and ends for the following week. I was excited just to get home so I could start my weekend already, but I didn't mind going over to Walmart with him, since I figured I could puppy dog eyes him into buying me a few extra sweet treats for me to enjoy. That and the alternative was to walk home, and since it looked like it was going to rain, I'd know I had chosen the better option. So we wandered around Walmart for a little while, talking about how school is going and what our family plans for the weekend are. I get my dad to agree to drive me over to a friend's house the next morning in exchange for a promise that I'll get all my homework done that evening. A small price to pay, since there's no way I'll be able to get over there on my own, since she lives on the other side of town. So we get checked out, we wheel the stuff out to the car and load it up into the trunk, and then we get ready to leave. But while we are driving out of the parking lot, a woman just sort of appears out of nowhere and stands in front of my father's car. She's wearing a red and black snapback with red hair falling out from under it and a t-shirt that says love on it with the O styled as a heart. Her clothes aren't dirty or anything, but she looks seriously methed out. What few teeth were still in her mouth were all yellow and rotten, and her eyes were just faded, like there was nothing behind them, no thought or reason whatsoever. Then she just starts saying, "This is my car," pointing down at the hood like, "How did you get my car?" At first my dad is polite with her, and I can tell he's in no mood for messing around. He's all like, "Nah, lady, this isn't your car. And you must be mistaken, but please move out of the street. Thank you." And I can tell from the tone in his voice that he's about to get mad with this lady real fast. But she will not move. She just stands there blocking our car and saying that this is her vehicle, repeatedly. That's when my dad turns to me in the back seat and asks if my phone has battery. I tell him yes, and he tells me to start recording what's happening in case we need evidence to show the cops. My dad gives the lady one last chance to get out of the way, and then he loses his temper completely and starts barking, saying something like, "Get your ass out of the way." The meth head in front of us, this lady, starts freaking out. She starts saying stuff like, "I just want to talk. I don't want violence, but I need to know how you got my car." My dad starts screaming at her again to get the hell out of the way, and eventually she does, and we drive along thinking the whole thing is over, and it was just some crazy, drugged-out meth head with delusions. But the situation, sadly, does not end there. We got to a set of traffic lights further down the road, and someone else then steps in front of the car. This time it's a guy wearing a dark jacket with short hair and a mustache. Honestly, each of these scumbags looked like they could have been paid extras on Breaking Bad. And he's putting on a similar act to the methed up lady before, who managed to catch up to us by that point. He's all like, can you get out? This is my car. And that's about the time I realized that this was a straight up attempt to carjack us. He wasn't like, hey, this is my friend's car or anything like that. It was obvious that they were trying to steal it. They thought that they could coerce some naive stranger out of their car. How dumb's that? The guy in front then puts his hands on the inside of his jacket, like he's about to pull out a gun or something. But still he remains all calm, like, just talk to me, dude, this is my car, how did you get my car? My dad turns around to my little brother Max and tells him to call 911. Max is shaking like a leaf, but he does as he's told, getting his phone out and dialing 911. My dad is still telling this guy to get out of the way and to leave us alone. It's not just me and my brother that are scared. I can hear it in my dad's voice, and that really got to me. My dad is tough. Like, to me, he's the strongest man in the world, and up until that point I had never heard his voice go like that. It's something that I don't think I'll ever forget. So as soon as Max had the 911 dispatcher on the line, my dad takes the phone off him and starts explaining the situation to the person on the other end. As he's doing this, some guy with a beard, sunglasses, and a blue hoodie then starts walking over to the driver's side. My dad tells Max to lock his door, but because he's on the phone, he's slightly panicked by this point, he forgets to lock his own. So this blue guy managed to open my dad's door, all calm, and asked, "What are you doing? This is her car," while he points over to the methed out lady. My dad then replies all polite that this is not her car, and then tries to shut the door again. The guy flips out, trying and failing to pry the door open again before my dad shuts it, screaming, "Get out of here! Get out of my car!" while kicking the driver's side door. If they would have just came up and tried to carjack us, that would have been bad enough. But the mind games they were trying to play with us, that was just downright scary. Like they expected us to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize this wasn't my car," and just give it to them. God, thinking about it makes me so angry. But at the time, all I could do was burst into tears as I filmed the whole thing. Right then, some other meth head appears at the passenger side where Max is sitting and starts banging on the side of the door. My dad starts trying to drive around the gang that was now surrounding us, and the dark jacket guy then jumps on the hood of the car while the other starts smashing a bicycle into the passenger door. My dad then seizes the opportunity and drives off down the avenue, with one of the meth heads still laying on the hood. He's driving slowly, talking to the 911 dispatcher the entire time, careful not to drive too fast in case the guy on the hood falls off and accidentally runs him over. But the next thing I know, there's this big roar of an engine that sounds to our right, I believe. And the guy in the blue hoodie is on some sort of motorcycle, revving the engine and preparing to give chase. He's pulling up alongside us every so often to shout, slow down, let the guy off." And Dad realizes he's talking about the guy lying on the hood. My dad slows down for like 2 seconds, and the guy in the hood, who has obviously realized what a stupid situation he's gotten himself into, rolls off the hood and runs over to the sidewalk to escape what could have amounted to serious life-changing injuries. Not that he didn't deserve it. It just didn't really need to happen, honestly. We'd rather see them in jail or something, not dead. After that, the biker guy stopped following us, and we got home safe without anyone getting hurt. I was still crying as we pulled up outside our house, and even Max was really shaken up, when he's normally so cool and nonchalant about everything. But I wasn't crying out of fear anymore. It was just pure relief and gratitude that my dad handled the situation so well and kept all of us safe. We all hugged it out when we got inside, and my mom panicked, wanting to know everything. I'll always remember how my dad was like, "I'm your father, and I will always protect you when I can." I don't think I ever loved him as much as I did in that moment. I don't really want to go into detail about the interactions we had with the cops afterward. They insisted it was all just a misunderstanding, but anyone who was there would know it was so much more than that. Much more sinister. Those meth heads were trying anything they could to slow us down and get us out of our car. And I know using that term might give off the bad taste to people about addiction and such, but this is not meant to be harmful or offensive to anybody going through addiction. These people were clearly on some sort of drugs, and were trying to do something very sinister in an attempt to probably get more drugs, and that is why I called them such. Nobody has believed me when I told them this story, but I swear to God it was true. I was in my front yard in Idaho one summer night, smoking a cigarette all by myself. There's a warehouse-style aluminum building that resells used construction materials and has an odd collection of all sorts of windows, bathtubs, barbecues, trusses, and other things in the yard out back. I heard some strange noises that sounded like someone banging something against the building, or knocking hard. The building is backed up to the bottom of a mountain. The mountain range goes on for probably a couple of 100 miles to the east, with only one sparse town about 40 miles from my house. The rest is just desert, a giant expanse of empty desert. I have heard these noises a lot over by this building throughout the years. I always assumed the noise must be made by a human, but this scenario has always seemed very unlikely to me, as there are no homeless people in my town and no one lives in that direction as it is an industrial park. Now that doesn't mean people aren't snooping around. What the noise is something banging on the building or knocking on it in quick succession. There is no animal I know of that would be able to bang on the building that hard, and for no reason. Why would they be doing this at midnight or 1 a.m.? Sometimes I get so frightened when I hear this noise and just go back inside. But for whatever reason, on this night in particular, I had it. I had enough of it. I was ready to go see what this was. I wanted to know what this was. So I manned up and decided to go investigate. I got over there and had the feeling I was being watched, but kept heading around the back of the building to see if I could hear anything else. Now at this point, I got hit from behind by a spotlight and went, "Oh great, somebody reported me, and now I'm going to have to explain myself to the police." I turned around fully ready to tell the cop that I had heard something breaking into the building, but there was nothing there. No cop, no source of light, absolutely nothing. I fully saw the spotlight hit me and saw my shadow on the building in front of me. I couldn't identify where to come from, but at this point, I had an awful feeling of dread and started back across the street toward my house. As I was getting close to the street, I saw what looked like a small dog with shaggy hair. The hair was so long it seemed to be covering its eyes. It was so late, I figured it was lost and I thought I could go over and check his tag and bring him home. The strange thing was, it was getting up and looking into the windows of an engineering firm. I have never seen a dog set up on its hind legs and looking into windows like this, but I figured it's probably hungry and looking for food or something. I came very close to it without making a sound because I did not want to make it run off. I knew it must need help. Well, I got to just a few feet away from this dog before it heard me. It turned and looked at me, and I swear it had one big eye where its nose should be. I was shocked, to say the least. It almost looked like a totally white skunk with long shaggy hair, with one big eye right where its nose should be. It went running, but my hunter instinct kicked in, and I jumped in front of it and went to grab it. I know, this was probably foolish, but at the time I wanted to capture it, or else no one would believe me. It went running the other way, but I cut it off again. I went to grab it, but at this point, it stood up on its hind legs and let out the most terrifying cat-like hissing noise I've ever heard. At this point, my rational mind kicked in and went, if this thing bites me or attacks me, who knows what might happen? I froze and watched it run off across the pavements and field and didn't make a single noise as it ran. I stood there trying to understand what I had just seen and encountered, and still to this day I have no idea what it could have been. Along with the spotlight that hit me from the same direction, and its strange behavior looking in the windows of that engineering firm, I'm still to this day utterly confused on what the hell it was. I have never heard of another cryptid that matches this description. Hi, I'm a long-time listener to The Swamp. My name is David, and I do security at a mall in eastern Idaho. Now, I have been told it's haunted, and I'll say I've experienced my fair share of paranormal things in my life. I've had several, just at this mall alone, and I wanted to share one for now, and maybe I'll share more in the future. A little background on me. I have done security for over 13 years and have seen some of the worst in people. I have also done the martial arts for about 29 years, so not scared of much honestly, and I have a deep set of faith. I'm a Christian and have the gift of discernment, and I'm empathetic. I can also feel and see the spiritual world around me. But enough about me. I was on a patrol outside my mall one night. I work graveyard shift. I saw I needed to refill my water bottle to stay hydrated. As I pulled up to the mall doors near our security office, I noticed the shape of a figure inside, about as tall as a young teen. I hurried inside thinking, great, someone got in or hid and I did not see them. After entering, I listened and quickly dropped off my water bottle in my office and relocked the door. I went into the mall silent, listening to the dark and waiting to see or hear anything to indicate the presence of a person. I searched the mall occasionally, hearing footsteps and then laughter. I looked in every such place and never could find anybody hiding. There were no teens, no doors opening, and no alarms going off. Nothing was caught on the security footage either. After clearing the mall and getting more water, I went back out to my security vehicle. I didn't see anything until I sat in the driver's seat and looked out my rearview mirror. I saw what looked like a group of teens in all black, with black eyes, and one smiled with a creepy, like I'm going to get you type smile. I whipped the car around to shine the light on the intruders, not more than 15 feet from me, and they were just gone. There was no way they could run or hide fast enough for me not to see them. I looked nearby and there was nothing. When the morning came, there were no more sightings, but at night I could still hear the laughter at times when I was checking the exterior doors. I don't really know how to explain this one. It's just one of those strange and creepy paranormal things that go on sometimes. I'm 34 years old now, and when this happened, I lived in Plummer, Idaho. I had just discovered with the help of the internet why I could see things nobody else could or didn't want to see. And sometimes I would dream about things that were going to happen, like the time my sister cut her knee open really good on a nail in the floor. In this case, I think I was 12 when this happened. I had just finished a shower and getting dressed when I decided to do some late night homework in my upstairs bedroom before the weekend got going, since I couldn't sleep anyway. I opened my window since it was a nice, warm, comfortable breeze, and I guess I had been sitting on my bed for a while since I started around, I think 7 or 8, and it was now almost midnight. Suddenly, I heard something on the roof. Before I forget to add this, we also had 2 big spruce trees in our backyard, and since it was a bit windy that night, I naturally thought it was maybe pine cones landing on the roof. Oh, how wrong I was. I wanted to go outside and get some fresh air, so I went out to my back porch. And I didn't feel like there was anybody out there. I didn't see anything on the fence, nothing in the grass. But then I heard it, scratching, like a cat running on the roof after a bird. Looking up, I saw something by the chimney before it crawled down to the other side to hide. I ran for the back door quickly and quietly and closed it and locked all the locks, and then I ran upstairs to my room. Surprisingly, I forgot all about my window that was open and sat back down and got back to working on my homework. Slowly, I hear a tapping sound. Looking up, I saw one long finger tapping on the window. As I walked over to it, I heard scratching again, and it was like it was trying to hide. I had just closed it when the face of a girl appeared on the other side. "Can I please come in? I'm cold." "No, I don't know you and my dad will get upset." "Please?" "No." And as if I had thrown water on her, she changed into this thing with a pale, loose-fitting like skin that seemed to be kind of hanging on its bones. It almost looked like a wet blanket over a hanger. This thing had long, thin arms and eyes that looked endless. They were like black pools of nothingness. In the end, after a few minutes of staring, it screeched like a screech owl, opening its mouth so big I swear I thought it was going to break its jaw. And then, as if it had no problem, it jumped off the roof and ran across the field into the street. At that point, I decided that was enough, so I put my books away, covered up, and went to sleep. The next morning, before I could tell my dad what happened, he was asking why I was up on the roof last night, and I explained to him that I was definitely not on the roof. I don't know what this thing was. This happened in 1990. First of all, it looked like a little girl asking to come inside, and when I said no, it changed into some weird creature screaming. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it to anybody, but if anybody listening to this might have an idea, I'd definitely love to know in the comments. When I was in my early 30s, I was living in the small town of Payette, Idaho. I went to a lot of parties, and threw a lot of parties myself. This story takes place after one party I had thrown at my house. Justin, a friend of mine, had brought a guy over to my house and asked if he could stay with me. This guy was tall and thin but muscular. He had prison tattoos on his arms and hands, and a crazy look in his eyes. That's what scared me the most. I didn't really want him there, but agreed to let him stay in my laundry room for a little while. But a little while turned into a little while longer. I think he was there for about 2.5 weeks. One day I confronted Justin about the guy, and how about he scared me. Justin confessed that the guy had just gotten out of prison for murder. I was livid that he decided to pawn this guy off on me. While he was in my house, he was doing meth and all kinds of crazy stuff. I could hardly sleep. I was so scared and nervous. One day he approached me saying he needed a ride to an Indian reservation in California. He was very pushy, so I agreed. I had planned on driving him to Ontario, Oregon, which is about 15 minutes away from Payette, and leaving him at the truck stop. But he was adamant about not stopping. On the drive, I kept noticing the guy reaching under his seat, over and over. Eventually, I was able to get a glance at what he was reaching for. It was a big framing hammer. At this point, I realized how serious this was. As we are leaving Ontario, he tells me he must take a leak and let's pull over on this dirt road. I was positive that if I pulled off, he was going to beat my head in with a hammer. So I refused. I told him I knew a better place to go. The guy was very frustrated that I wouldn't pull over. We found the store in John Day, Oregon, which was about 2 hours from home. But when he got out of the car to go inside, he took my keys. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. When he came back out, he started bragging about the stuff he stole. He had some snacks, a drink, and a pocket knife that he was showing off. After a while, in a small town of Lakeview, Oregon, we had to stop at a church to get some gas vouchers, as we didn't have any money, and my car was low on gas. But to get the voucher valid, we had to go to the police station. He wanted to get the gas voucher in my name, but I refused, so we had to do it in his name. Once again, as we walked in, he took my keys. But shortly after they checked his ID, it turned out he had a warrant for his arrest. As soon as I got my keys back, I got the heck out of there as fast as I could. Outside of Lakeview, there's a small town called Cedarville, California, where luckily I had friends. I was only able to find one of them when I visited him at work. I talked to my friend Tim and explained my situation. He was able to get me enough money to get home, and thinking back on it, I realized how lucky I am to be alive. If I would have pulled off on that road, I most likely would have been dead. I know that you wanted to kill me and take my car. I'm thankful that I'm still alive and forever grateful that I had some sense not to pull over. I'm a 23-year-old woman who grew up in a small town in Idaho. My story takes place a few years ago. The county fair was a real big deal in my area. They would put on big events and shows and bring in some fun rides and attractions. It was one of the few times we had excitement in our quiet little area. I remember I used to love attending the demolition derby and hypnotist show at the county fair every single year. My cousins Jennifer and Kristen would go with me, and this particular year was no exception. We planned to meet up at the fairgrounds around 1 p.m. to get good seats for the hypnotist show at Saturday. We would also have some fun at the fair until the demolition derby that night. I couldn't drive yet at the time, so I arranged for my dad to drop me off at the fairground and pick me up later that night. He agreed and dropped me off at the fairgrounds an hour early. I decided to kill the time by wandering around to the art display. It was in a small barn-like building toward the front of the fairgrounds, so there I was admiring all of the paintings, drawings, and photography that had been around. I started to get the strange feeling like I was being watched, though. I looked around and noticed very quickly a man standing not far from me. I remember thinking he was dressed strangely for the sunny 90-degree weather that we were having. He wore a black hoodie, black denim pants, and black shoes. He also had a painful-looking burn-like sore on his lip. I couldn't tell if he was staring at me or not because he had sunglasses on, but he smiled when I looked at him. He just stood there smiling at me until I waved politely and turned to leave. Just as I was beginning to move, the man walked toward me. "Hello, my name is Jeremy," he spoke quickly, and his movements were jerky as he kept reaching out his hand to shake mine. "What's your name?" Getting a weird vibe, but deciding he was probably harmless, I decided to try and be nice. "Hello, Jeremy, my name is Chloe," I said with a polite smile. I noticed more burn-like sores on his palm as he reached out to shake my hand, which did gross me out a little bit. "It's nice to meet you." The man named Jeremy walked away without a word after that. I shrugged off the experience and checked the time. Seeing as I was supposed to meet my cousin in about 15 minutes, I decided to go wait in the spot where we were supposed to meet. As I left the building, I saw Jeremy standing by the door texting on his phone. I was a bit of an awkward teenager, so I pretended not to notice him as I walked past him into the grounds. Just a few steps behind me, Jeremy started walking in the same direction. After a while, I started feeling a bit awkward with him walking so closely behind me, so I decided to stop and let him pass. I turned to enter a booth selling jewelry and pretended to admire its wares, but Jeremy stopped walking too. He leaned against a food cart not far from me where I was, and started texting again. I waited in the jewelry booth for what seemed like 10 minutes or more, and he still had not left. I decided to just leave, and just as I left the booth, Jeremy moved again right behind me. "Hello, my name is Jeremy," he said again, reaching out to shake my hand. "What is your name?" I was so confused. He couldn't have forgotten that he had already introduced himself to me. It was literally 10 minutes ago. I thought maybe he might be joking, so I let out an awkward, "Hello, Jeremy. It's nice to meet you again," I joked. "My name is still Chloe." Jeremy seemed to miss my humor and continued talking. Talking more interesting things, like, "Chloe's a pretty name. Are you from around here? How old are you? Don't judge me for being so dumb." I was from a small, trusting community, but I gave him the honest answer to his questions, despite getting a really weird vibe from the guy. "Thank you." I smiled. "I'm 16 and yeah, I'm from the town just south of here." Just like before, once I answered his questions, Jeremy seemed to catch interest in something else and walked away without a word. I checked the time and noticed that I was now running late to meet Kristen and Jennifer. I made the rest of the way to where I was supposed to meet them without interruption. I told my cousins about what happened while I waited for them, and they also thought it was a little weird. We laughed it off and found our seats. The hypnotist show started, and we enjoyed the beginning, but it wasn't long before I started getting that feeling like I was being watched again. After a quick scan through the audience, I saw something I found disturbing. Jeremy, the guy from earlier, was now sitting a few rows behind us. He smiled and waved at me as soon as I recognized him. I noticed he was not alone this time. He was sitting with 3 other men, all dressed in black hoodies and sunglasses. I decided not to wave back, thinking he might have a crush. I did not want to lead him on. I could tell they were watching us through the whole show. Kristen and Jennifer did too, and it made it hard for us to enjoy the humorous antics of the hypnotist. We decided to leave before the show was over and leave the fair for a while, hoping that the creepy men in the black hoodies wouldn't be there when we returned. We left for about an hour and a half to get lunch and spend some time at their house. At this time, we decided it might be safe to return to the fair. We walked back, and just as we walked through the gates of the fairgrounds, the same group of men in black hoodies approached us again. Jeremy walked straight up to me and said, "Hello, my name is Jeremy." Again reaching out to shake my hand. "What is your name?" My stomach was in knots. This just was not normal. I did not shake his hand this time, wanting to get away from them quickly. "Hello, Jeremy, my name is Chloe," I said quickly as I walked past him, still trying to be at least polite. I still said nothing more and walked right past him into the crowd, not looking back. It would be hours before I saw Jeremy again. We wandered the fair pretty much without interruption for the remainder of our wait, and we went to the demolition derby at around 6 that night. We talked amongst ourselves and decided if we ran into Jeremy again, my cousin would pick up her phone and pretend I had a phone call from my dad, thus letting him know I was not alone even if we get separated. We agreed, and as the show ended, we still had not seen him. We wandered around the games and rode a few rides. It was dark and nearing the time I was supposed to meet my dad. My cousin got a call from my dad on the phone. He instructed me to meet him at a restaurant a short walk away from the fairgrounds in a half an hour, and I agreed. Just as my cousins and I exited our last ride, I was once again approached by Jeremy. Alone this time, he walked right up to me and once again reached out to me to shake his hand. "Hello, I'm Jeremy," he said with a smile that split some of the sores around his mouth. "What is your name?" I was sick of this guy, and I decided to give him a fake information this time. "Hello, Jeremy, my name is Hannah," I said, looking to my cousin to cue her fake phone call. Jeremy simply shook his head. "It isn't nice to lie, Chloe," he said before walking away. The three of us got chills after that encounter. I told my cousins I was tired and wanted to go home. They agreed and offered to walk with me to meet my dad. They had a curfew of their own and I didn't want them to be late, and besides it wasn't a far walk, so I declined their offer. We parted with hugs and I promised I would call them to confirm that I made it home safely. I then exited the fairgrounds and walked through the town to meet my dad. Not far away from the grounds, I noticed I wasn't alone. There was a tall man in a black hoodie following me. My heart skipped a beat because I recognized him as one of the men Jeremy had been with earlier. I quickened my pace, pretending not to notice him, when I saw half a block down the road was even more disturbing. Another one of the three men with Jeremy was standing by a sidewalk ahead of me. I was getting really alarmed, so I crossed the street and walked on the other side. The two men in hoodies kept up pace with me on the other side of the street, and I heard one of them make a whistling noise, though neither of them said anything. I was nearing the post office when Jeremy came into my vision, at the end of the sidewalk in front of me. I was really starting to get scared. What were they doing out here? The place I was supposed to meet my dad was still far away, and I didn't really want to be on this street alone anymore. So I quickly ducked into the post office. They were about to close, but there was a man and his son leaving. I quickly explained what was going on and asked them if they could walk with me. I hoped seeing that I wasn't alone would scare the stalkers into leaving me alone. They agreed and I walked out with them, but Jeremy and his gang were nowhere to be seen. The friendly people I met at the post office walked me all the way to the restaurant where I met my dad and told him the whole thing. My dad called the police and I explained again what had happened. The report was filed, but Jeremy and his friends in the black hoods were never found.